Welcome to the First Party Pod, and we're your hosts, Gloria Steiner.
Rio Longacre.
All right. I'm excited for this podcast. We have so much to dive into. I think we first need to give a shout out to this beautiful studio, Delve Deeper. So thank you so much for letting us use this great studio.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, Anton, and obviously Tyler for helping do the whole production.
Yeah.
It's a great studio. So I got a lot of good feedback about it from people from last time in terms of production quality. So excited to do this again, Gloria.
Likewise. All right, so in this episode, we're going to take a look at some of the hottest industry topics that have been happening in the past couple weeks. For instance, the trade desk stock plunge, maybe high touches investment, lots of things that happened, and I think we have some great views on each one. And then we're going to go really deep into one of my most passionate topics now, incrementality. I think that this is just such a big buzzword, and I can't wait to really dig deep into this topic with you.
Definitely. Don't forget, I also have a wrap up from Ramp Up, which I quite literally just got off the plane and came here from. So
Lots of good topics.
yeah, my voice is probably a little gravelly as a result. Live Ramp, it's a good time. Let me put it that way. So we'll cover that as well. I agree, some good meaty stuff to dive into this week.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, let's kick it off. I think that you brought up something very interesting, and I listened to this podcast as well, but I'll let you share or take the stage because you brought this topic up to me. But quality versus outcomes. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend this is my topic. I mean, I just love the debate that's been going on. There was I think it was last year, March. Speaking of Ramp Up, Live Ramp, they had Scott Howe. He had I think it was a quarterly report last year. He announced it was the age of outcomes, right? Which I thought was cool. There's been a good debate going on Open Market, which is Eric Franchi and Joe Zappa. I love that.
Great podcast.
Yeah, they're
really
fun.
great podcast.
They've got some really good topics, and they had a debate. It was 11 about outcomes versus quality, which I thought was good. I don't know if anyone will settle the debate, but I think it's a good one. I really think it begs the question though of like, okay, so long-term trend. Yeah, I mean I think with digital, like we've been going towards outcomes for 25 years anyway, right? I mean, that's why it's more measurable. You can tie it to outcome. You can tie it to conversions. It's got, I think, these inherent advantages over traditional media, which are really awesome. But then you have the kind of reverse of that, like the counterfactual is, okay, well, the Nike example, right? They went all in a performance media, right? First 2 or 3 years, it was awesome. They're dumping money into it. They're seeing lots of conversions. Return on ad spend was off the charts. Lots of sales. And then guess what? It fell off a cliff. People didn't know about the new products. People forgot about their brand. These new upstart brands like OnCloud and Under Armour suddenly came onto the scene, and people started buying them, right? And I think Nike realized, wow, we've got to start doing some more branding, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also the CTV thing, right? And I think obviously you can have like performance television, right? You can tie it to outcomes, and I think that's kind of cool. You can actually have QR codes, do shopping, right? But so there is a very distinct outcome-y element to CTV, but also I think a lot of it's top of funnel. That's what we're seeing with a lot of the brands that I'm talking to today, that as they're starting to test with CTV, it's more measurable, but there's like a branding element. So I brought this up, and it's funny. Joe, he responded and said, well, it's all about outcomes, because ultimately the outcomes they're driving towards, building towards sales, that might be one step in it, right? So I don't know. I guess, again, we're not going to settle it. It's a cool debate. It's a lot of fun. And I think what we're going towards, this was covered in Ad Tech Dot a couple weeks ago.
Okay, yeah.
One of their guests we were talking about.
Yeah.
At some point, like you're going to be able to go into a DSP, or maybe a meta DSP, or maybe maybe your agency will, but it's going to be easier to log in and buy inventory anywhere. You're going to be able to buy CTV. You're going to be able to buy digital out of home. You're going to be able to buy.
It's happening.
Totally.
It's already happening.
And it's pretty cool. I mean, and you think like back in the day, it was like, you do your upfronts, right? You get your linear television that way, and then digital started. So it's eventually we'll have this convergence, and we're going to have like not only be able to buy from one place, but we're going to have common audience platforms kind of underpinning it all. So you're right. It's happening, and that's kind of cool.
I was just, going into this topic, and I'm like, why is it quality versus? Does quality drive outcomes, and quality drives good outcomes. And now that we can measure everything, and it seems, that's what Gigi does, is measures streaming TV ads, for instance, we can see that quality driving those outcomes in my mind. So I think it'll be like a convergence almost of these two things that we're going to see in the future.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's interesting. I mean, yeah, but you probably can have both. I mean, I think you have one, you're gonna have the other,
Yeah.
right? I think it's interesting too, you mentioned streaming or CTV, right? Like, remember Amazon opened it up, like Amazon Prime Video, right? Was it about a year ago? And, I think last year, $4 billion, right? And, I read analyst reports said it should be 10 this year.
I believe that, and I just read something that I read about the sports, broadcasts are just being eaten up now by these streaming TV platforms and DSPs. And the more that those sports platforms are going to be on, let's say, on Amazon, that's absolutely, I can see 10 billion happen for sure.
Apple's making big moves, like you have MLS now, right? So there's the Tyson fight, right, on Netflix, which is kind of,
Yeah.
I watched, I crashed a couple times,
Yeah. Okay.
but Netflix is going to be, I mean, there was that rumor, I think, on Architecture, they talked about the rumor that Netflix was going to start bidding in the NFL. I mean, if you look at the top 100 rated shows, right? I mean, it's like the 90 of the top 100 are always NFL, right?
Yeah.
In any region. So
Right.
obviously, if you want to get in front of audiences, that's the right place. So, but I think they were also saying that 2030, a lot of the contracts come up, so it'll be a few years. But yeah, there's a lot of demand. I actually posted, there's that eMarketer report. I think I found it on X actually, and then it was showing how CPMs had fallen because there was more video. So I think it was started at 50, like
That's a good one.
$50 CPM or something crazy for
Yeah.
CTV ads. But probably settled in, I think it's the 20s. So it's still expensive, right? But but to your point, it's good inventory.
Yeah, and Amazon actually just released private auction on Prime Video and all their streaming TV. So now it's going to be even more aggressive bidding, and I'm very interested to see where that's going to go as well. So a lot of different things happening in the industry.
That's wild. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great.
So the next topic I want to talk about is the Trade Desk stock plunge. So I read a lot about this. I was very intrigued, and I think that this is the first time that they've reported, like, this is, in the past many years, they've
32,
done
33 months or something like that, right?
exactly, yeah, they've done super, super well, and now they're being completely, looked at with a microscope because this happened, and everyone has their speculations of, "Oh, this is the end of it. This is, they've addressed their total addressable market share, and this is it. Unless they go vertically, they may not be able to exist. They need to go into AI." And I have seen, they had the Ventura launch, they launched Kokai, which is their new advertising kind of platform. So, and have they gone super well, and have we seen a big lift? Not yet. And I think from the CEO, he mentioned many different ways that, I think, in LinkedIn, they were saying like 19 different ways that they can now pivot. And that's like too many ways. How are you going to be able to focus and really drive the company forward? So I don't know where I stand with where they're gonna, because I see some points as truth, but I also think the Trade Desk is massive company with very smart people behind them that can do really great things. I hope that they continue that, in the future they will do well. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't disagree that the message was a bit muddled.
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of points,
Yeah.
right? It was 15, 20, whatever it was. And yeah, so it was a lot of points. It was a little muddled. And then another criticism I heard was AI was like number 14. I was way down
Right.
the list. I was like, okay, like this is the big thing and didn't make your top 10, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's probably fair. I'm seeing a lot of interesting AI being applied within, whether it's audience creation, optimization, you know, there's some interesting things going on right now with AI, and the fact they didn't call that out at all, because DSP is the natural place you would begin to implement some of those things, right? And whether it's content generation or right, so I think that's probably a miss. But one thing that I think was maybe missed a little bit too, in that they really called out that they were going to go after the Fortune 100 brands, right? Now, a Trade Desk, I mean, the whole name is, the way they've gone to market is being very agency friendly. They've built incredible partnerships with all the big agencies, especially the holdcos, right? So going brand direct, does that mean agencies are an intermediary or pass through, or maybe you start cutting them out, right? You could argue on one hand, maybe that jeopardizes their existing model, but I actually think it's really smart, Gloria, because in-housing, like it or not, is happening.
Hmm.
Not every brand's going to in-house, and not every brand's going to in-house everything. Only certain brands will in-house media buying, right? Because I even know some brands that in-housed it, then decided it was too hard and spun it back out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one client, she spent 3 years building a massive in-house team and all the technology and everything, and then they just found that, for traditional media, for ex-US are just too hard.
Yeah.
So they ended up spinning it back out. They found a new agency of record to do that. But some brands are going to.
Hmm.
And even if they're not in-housing all of the media buying, they get like at least the analytics, the measurement, maybe even audience creation in the media strategy, that's all going in-house. And with
Yeah.
AI, I mean, a lot of MMM is going to be driven by AI now. So I mean, that's probably going to be done more by brands,
Yeah.
right? So I think that and many agencies are embracing it, but I think generally speaking, the in-housing thing is going to continue, and it's a smart move by Trade Desk to say, okay, we're going to work with these brands because we feel many of the biggest are the big, the Fortune 100,
Mm.
going to do this, and we're going to need to have direct relationships with them so they use our tools instead. So I think that yeah, they got dinged. I mean, maybe it was deserved, maybe not, but I am long on Trade Desk. I think they're a great company, and kind of if you believe that the open web will continue, I mean, they're the DSP for that, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I hope that their bet on brands going in-house is valid and that agencies aren't ticked off by the transition, but, yeah, we'll definitely see in the
Some
future.
probably will,
Yeah.
but everything's mixing up now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, I think we're going to start seeing even many publishers start talking directly to brands.
Yeah.
Whether it's just, I mean, I think that ad sales motion, like they're getting better at it. I think there'll be more of that. So I think there's going to be a lot of like gray areas and changing of definitions over the next few years. So I think it's a smart move. And while I get it, there's some risks. I think it's a good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely see. Well, talking about AI and changing up the industry and not being on their list, AI is definitely very high on this company's list. The high touch investment that happened, I think, was 80 million recently, and they must have listened to our previous episode, because clearly they changed up their strategy. They were smart. They're not classifying themselves as a CDP anymore. They're actually classifying themselves as an AI decisioning product. I think that's extremely smart. I think they're gonna go very far, and, yeah, I'm all for this company. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm a fan of High Touch. Really like them. Well-run company, smart leadership. They've kind of done all the right moves, right?
Mhm.
Despite being like we talked about last time, CDP is a tough space. It has been the last few years. They may not say they're CDP anymore, and someone was joking about that yesterday at a ramp up. What are they today, right?
Yeah.
But but yeah. So I think in this kind of like, why did they get the 80 million? It was Series C, right? Look, why did they get that? I mean, I think there's really, I think three reasons. I mean, they may not be saying they're CDP anymore, but like the reality is like there's a lot of like C360 kind of customer data, first party data work going on.
Mm.
Now some of that might just be in cloud data warehouses, and that's where being a composable CD is very important, right? 'Cause they can actually run on the local cloud data environment, right? Which is great for them. So there's actually a lot of like first party data, customer data, CDP-ish work going on more than ever, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
so CDP as a category, CDP might be more a feature than a product, right? And maybe you could argue that.
Yeah.
And I think high touch, so I think that's very smart. That's one move they've done, which is good. This investment validates that. I think number two, you mentioned a better and agentic AI. They had that announcement last summer, right? Where they started spinning out AI features, right? I mean, so
Mhm.
they started that. They got a reputation for being an innovator within kind of the customer data AI space,
Mhm.
right? It was a decisioning AI, if I remember right.
Mhm.
So I think now putting that agentic layer on top of it,
Huge.
is huge. You have this great customer data. You can there's a lot you can do with that. So
Mhm.
I think that's really smart. And then they're doing things, I think, a little faster than some of the other like competitors, let's say,
Yep.
whether they're CDP or not. So I had a couple clients. We were working with them on paid media activation,
Mhm.
like directly going into clean rooms. And then, in fact, we were doing this with Amazon Marketing Cloud a
Nice.
couple years ago with them, right? Where we're pushing it right into activation from that. And the fact that they call it audiences, not segments, a lot of the legacy CDPs. So I think they've made some good moves. They've been ahead of the market in certain things. They're innovators in AI. And, they've proven that, as you talked about last time, there's definitely a market for this. So good
Mhm.
for them.
Yep.
Well deserved.
Yeah. No,
I'm
and
excited to see what they do.
same here. Yeah, I'm very excited. All right, last topic before we dive into the ramp up review from you, is AppLovin. This can't be more on my LinkedIn feed or when I'm reading. It's everywhere. You know, when I first wrote this topic down, or maybe it was you, I was looking to them. did great. Huge skyrocket of their earnings. That's fantastic. And then Wednesday, short selling was all I could read about. So this company, it's interesting because I was reading that they are known as a black box, and that's what people are really bringing to light now. And I think that's bringing a little bit of uncertainty in their future and what it holds. And it's this company I think I heard about in November last year, and now I just can't stop reading about them. It's incredible. I believe it's a bubble that will burst. I think that maybe they're too black box and it
I'm laughing
might
because like some of the things I've been reading about are just wild. Yeah.
I might be on the short selling side at the moment. But yeah, it's just incredible this company pretty much for me came out of nowhere and now is all everyone can talk about.
Well, they're the most valuable ad tech company. I mean,
Yeah.
that's yes, which is
They
which
was
is wild, right?
poor times.
Yeah,
The
they
Trade Desk?
significantly. I mean, they were even for a while, but then they just surged, and Trade Desk had that,
Yeah.
took that the stock to off. It was just wild. Yeah, no, it's I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to claim to be an expert in either gaming or especially hyper casual gaming.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Me
just
neither.
and it's very murky and but I would even going back a year, I was always tweeting out like I just don't get this company.
Mm.
Like even like I remember like Eric Seufert was like talking about how it's they're doing well and like and they've had their proponents over the years, right? I mean, a lot of them, right? A lot of people really believe in this company.
Mhm.
I just never got it, right? Not saying it's a scam or not, right? But then I read that report by Lauren Balick a couple weeks ago, right? I mean, I think she published it mid-January. She had a follow-up actually a couple days ago,
Mm.
right? And she accused them basically of being a pyramid scheme, right? And she accused them of front running all these downloads and all this stuff. So I didn't know again. I didn't know much about them, so I decided to download a few games that they were
Oh,
monetizing.
smart.
I think Plagendary and Hole. There's like a few by Voodoo Studios and a couple others. And then I found out my daughter is playing them,
Oh,
right? So
yeah.
she's like, "Oh, Dad, you're playing this game, right?" So, but I thought it was wild. So I downloaded these games, and like you play one game,
Mhm.
and you get an ad for another game, and you have to sit through it,
Oh,
and
interesting.
it's like 2 minutes, and
Mm.
sometimes you get two ads. I didn't see a single valid brand, like actual brand. It was all these
Wow.
other games by either the same studio or another hokey
Wow.
studio. Apparently,
You're
all these
thinking it's brands as well.
yeah, these studios are also maybe there are some that are like
Yeah.
legit ads, but I didn't see any, right? And I
Yeah.
played for about an hour, right? So,
Wow.
and I mean, the games were kind of fun, right? So I played like hole, you kind of this black hole, you can suck up people and then eventually buildings. It's really, it's fun. And, but it's so spammy. The user
Yeah.
experience is, I mean, you're watching more ads than you're playing.
Wow. Does your daughter get annoyed by them?
Like she'll be playing, but then she'll have her iPad here and she'll have friends on like Facebook, Messenger chat. And then she'll be like, so she'll like, she'll let it go and won't care. But
Mm.
for me, it's like super annoying because I can't multitask like that, right?
Yeah.
I'm too old, right? So, so we, so I thought I mean, I learned a couple of things from that. It's like, number one, like, these are not like, no, who's paying for these ads,
Mm.
right? It's just other games.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing. I mean, is this legit? I don't know, right? It just seems a little suspicious, right?
Yeah.
And then you read about all of the faking all the, forcing downloads, right? Apparently that was the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the counterfactual though, and like I think a couple people on X when I was tweeting, I tweeted out the article and said, I don't know about this. This seems really suspicious to me. A couple of people wrote back and said, you're underestimating the market for this. Like
Really?
you go in the subway, you go in a bus, all those people, a lot of them with Androids are playing these hyper casual games.
Hmm.
You're underestimating. I think Matt Barris said that. So that's fair, right?
Mm.
And maybe I am underestimating it, right? I mean, not claiming to be an expert, but generally when something's too good to be true, right? But they were able, so I'm not saying that, I'm not saying this is fraud, but it
Yeah.
seems a little
It
suspicious.
does. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, interested to see where this company goes. I don't think there's that big of a market, in my opinion, and it just seems weird that it just sprung up and now they're, divesting their game business and then going into CTV. It just seems a little strange. All right, so you got off the plane today from Ramp Up. I'm excited to hear what is the hot topics. What's your review? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, Ramp Up was great. I mean, I've been a bunch of times. Like I think I said earlier, Live Ramp. I mean, they're pros when it comes to this. Yeah, it's a really good event. It's kind of become like almost the warm up for Cannes, right?
Mm.
I mean, not all of that tech is there, but most of it is, right? I
Mhm.
mean, Live Ramp, they're the in what they do, identity onboarding, identity spying, a lot of the services they have, they acquired Habu, which is,
Yeah.
which was a clean room. So they've got, I think, a good data collaboration story now. You know, most big brands work with them.
Mhm.
Most of my customers do, that's for sure. They do a good job. It was, great content. Scott Howe he always gets up. He has this great energy and enthusiasm. And then, we're in the era of outcomes. So because it's outcomes, I mean, I think the buzzwords were measurement, attribution, and incrementality, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Those came up a lot. And I love the fact that they had the narrative like this is the ecosystem of partners. There's the trade desk, there's DB360, there's, all of the people we work with, there's Meta, there's TikTok, and we're at the core of all this. We're working with everyone. I think it's kind of interesting too. I mean, Ramp ID, I mean, yeah, there's a million alt IDs, and especially during the cookie third-party deprecation.
Yeah.
I mean, that run up to when Google something rugged everyone, right? I think the run up to that, I mean, there's a lot of different alt IDs, but I mean, I think Ramp ID is the alt ID kind of the stitches, like the glue that holds everything together to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
Most of my clients use it, and I think for a lot of the stuff we're starting to see from from sell side, it's Ramp ID is going to be one of the great tools that we use in order to, to really match up audiences and provide seller-defined audiences and better sell-side signals. I mean, it's important. I love the fact that I think like Habu's a great clean room. That was a smart acquisition, but they're not selling it as again, to the CDP comment before. It's more like a data collaboration. It's a feature in this broad package of solution, this broad solution we have. You need it. You're going to need to share data, collaborate in a privacy safe way. They're not trying to just sell it as a clean room, which I think is smart. So I like the way they pivoted. Good content. They had a really good Vihan ran a really good panel on retail and commerce media.
Nice.
He had some heavy hitters from PayPal and CVS on there. Great discussion. So it was a really good event. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing them again. At Cannes. We've got usually they have. I think their party is one of the best ones.
Nice.
They got lots of big brands. I mean, they've got great customer base. So, yeah, it was good. I will go. It's worth the price of admission, and I would go again. Put it that way.
Nice. Yeah, and LiveRamp is it's just such a big company and a staple out there. I think the Ramp ID was the first idea I heard of cross collaboration in AMC. So definitely everywhere and a great company to work with.
Like anyone, they get their criticism, right? I mean,
sure.
But I think people complain it could be expensive. But at the end of the day, I think if we're in an era of quality, right,
exactly.
or outcomes, but I think whether it's either one. I mean, like if you're having better inventory, better identity, better understanding what our audience is composed of, what are the attributes of these audiences. I mean, I think LiveRamp's got a solid value proposition there.
I agree. All right, let's dive into the main topic today, incrementality. So I'm going to start with my classic hot take, and then I'm curious to know your take. So the advertising industry, in my mind, has almost ruined the true meaning of incrementality, and it really gets to me. Again, I read a lot on LinkedIn, and everyone thinks they're measuring incrementality with new to brand customers or using AMC, all these things. And it's just, to me, it's not true. People are inventing new ways to define this word, and it's something that we've been using for a very long time. And to me, the true way to measure it is via holdout groups, and it's data science backed, and it's hard to do. So many people are not doing it. So they're saying, I'm going to do other things to think, in the place of actually doing it correctly. There's this actually great quote by, I think it was Kevin Weiss from Sky. Basically, he was saying that incrementality is easy to do if you have a subjective opinion about it. It's almost impossible to do if you don't have the right team and data science backing your incrementality testing. But that's my hot take, and I'm curious to hear, what does incrementality mean to you, and how do you think the industry right now is evolving with incrementality?
Yeah, it's funny. It's been coming up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I started hearing it a lot last fall.
Yeah.
I have clients because we're doing a lot of work at clean rooms and running measurement for clients, and started coming up suddenly, almost I think maybe last summer.
Yeah.
It's almost out of nowhere. And I've been working in marketing, direct marketing, digital marketing for 25 years, right? So I remember when I first became aware of incrementality, I think the first time I heard it was I was working with a big global pharmaceutical company, And I remember I was asking, how do you do attribution? Right? And my client's so funny. He's just this old farmer marketer. He's like, well, he draws this big pie. He's like, this is all of our sales and marketing. We take a little slice and we do any sales or any marketing and we look at the lift. I said, this is our incrementality test. It's so funny. It's like, I remember that I said,
That's
and
hilarious.
they didn't even have a complete picture of sales because they're getting us going. Scripts are written by retail pharmacies and they get this data from IMS is kind of a completely model it out. So I don't know how effective that model was. I'll be honest
Mhm.
with you, but but I think that that's the concept, right? You're going to market.
Mhm.
You're going to be employing marketing tactics, spending money. Is it worth the investment, right? Look, we
Yeah.
know marketing works. If
Yeah.
marketing didn't work, no one would do it, right? So
But it's what marketing works.
totally. Well, I think that's it, right? So I think a lot of people go in, and this has been the thing with retail media. It's interesting, right? I'll actually have brands say, like, we're going to do incrementality testing because we're not sure if we should be spending any money. Well, we like
Yeah.
okay, turn it off.
Yep.
Wait a couple months, see what happens. Your sales will go down, right? Now, how much will they go down? It's your point. Like, should you be doing search? Should you be doing display? Should you be doing Prime Video? I mean, there's all these
Mhm.
different like products you can now buy, right?
Yeah.
Just within retail media. So we know marketing works. It's not like a test of is marketing work or not. We know it. So it's
Yes.
like to your point, what works, what doesn't. So I think there's a lot of it's become a buzzword. I think
Mhm.
because of retail media, because it's so close to like conversion.
Probably.
I think you're getting questions like, should we be doing this?
Yeah.
Are these customers going to be buying this anyway? Like, so should we spend any money, right? So I think retail media has made it relevant and hot. And because of that, everyone's like all these bandwagon people jumping on, oh, we're gonna have an incrementality report, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's what we're kind of seeing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I've been seeing this, triangle everywhere, and it's always incrementality feeds, the MMM, which feeds attribution, and you should always be doing all 3. And I do agree, and I think a question comes up is and a lot of brands actually ask me, "How often should I be doing incrementality testing?" And I think it's well, if we go into the ways that you can, and you can do it correctly, is, ghost ads, you can do geographical incrementality testing, which is something that we do at GG, um, and randomized control trials. There's many different ways, and some of the big companies like Meta, Google have these ingrained in their business. And some might say it's kind of a black box, but you can still do it. And I think Amazon has for sure, like, I'm just waiting for them to come out with their incrementality testing and, probably ghost ads is my thought, but it's the question of how often do I do this to really see that lift? For example, geographic holdouts, you're holding out a significant portion of the US, for example, from not seeing your ads, and that's scary for a client.
And even then, like if you're holding out certain regions, are they the same audiences in those regions? Are they going to react? I mean, so I guess it has to be scientific.
Exactly.
And I also have a hard time trusting some of these like so a platform rolls out with an incrementality report. That's
Mhm.
black box. We're not going to explain how. Okay, what does that really mean? What are you really doing? And ultimately, again, you're marketing versus not marketing, just tactic versus that tactic versus no. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really what incrementality should be testing. So it should be scientific.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone should just trust like, oh, this report's going to do it for me,
Yeah.
right? And then also, I like for retail media, if someone wants to do true incrementality testing, if they're an endemic, I mean, is it only on-site conversions you're capturing or they're off-site too, right? Because what we found, we've done these ad exposed versus non-ad exposed, new to brand versus existing customers. Okay, well, how often are they purchasing? But is it driving offsite conversions a month
Mhm.
later? If it is, I mean, you should know about it, right? It's important. So I think implementing either CAPI or having first-party data upload, I don't think that you're going to solve incrementality without that.
Yep.
And if you're not endemic, I mean, of course, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but even if you're endemic, I think that what we found is people might see an ad a bunch of times. Okay, well, but then they might go to your website a few weeks later and maybe they buy there instead of Amazon, or maybe they go into your store, right? Buy
100%.
there. So I think knowing that and be able to attribute those conversions, because we've even found, like we did a lot of work with a big telco, people were going into a store and buying a device 6, 8 weeks later, and we know that that was because of an ad they saw
Right. Yep.
on the retail media. We know it was. They saw that ad 4 or 5 times. I mean, we can never prove it maybe, but like we're pretty sure. So I think understanding that's important and 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 it can be tough to upload the data and in CAPI can be tough to implement, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it, exactly. I think if you're gonna do an incrementality test, it is a lot of risk, but it's worth it. And something that I've been building out at GG specifically is our incrementality testing. I think the way I envision this product and now that it's built is one, we do geographic holdouts,
Okay.
and we actually do a risk profiling beforehand. So we ask the brand, how much of your total sales do you want to be the holdout? How many households? We're specifically streaming TV, so we're really focusing on that. And we look at, do you want a specific product that we focus in on? Is your streaming TV ad looking at one product? Should we focus on that? So we get really granular with doing it right and making sure that the brand has full transparency of, hey, these are all your holdout. This is your holdout group. This is your control group. Like, look at it, approve it, and we'll go forward. And then when we show the results, it is detailed, and we show you the data science behind it. This is the model we use. I think that's something that's actually why the incrementality word has tumbled into what it is today, is because tool providers aren't transparent with what they're doing, and that really bothers me, because if you're going to run an incrementality test, they're not cheap. So you better be sure you know what the tool provider is doing, and that it's going to result in actual results you can trust, and be transparent about it. So I think that's the way I've kind of gone about this feature. And yeah, I hope that it just provides brands a little bit more trust in that this is actually going to be working.
It should give you trust. It should give you confidence that you're spending your money in the right places. Again, you're not proving it, disproving marketing or a tactic, right? I
Yeah.
mean, or you're just finding out like what's effective, how effective is it? Based on effectiveness, how much do you want to spend? And even like might be simple things like we run these tests, and it might just be put a frequency cap in, right? Like after the 7th or 8th ad exposure, like there's almost no incremental lift from it, right? So I think just identifying things like that. I mean, again, you're not going to say, oh, we shouldn't do this, but it's okay, well, how should we do it,
Yeah.
right? I think it's very important.
To your other point on the data collaboration side as well, it is very important, as you're mentioning. And since GG has built this 1P platform, we can already use the first party data, which is such a huge part of the data. So I don't like leaving that out is, yeah, I think a mistake. You shouldn't even do the incrementality test if your D2C is a big part of your business. Then we can also use, for instance, the stockline data and say, hey, people actually purchased in a retailer. So there's so much possibility with now data collaborations and all this opening up and becoming more of a standardization across the industry. It's so easy, or to go to a tool provider and help you to be able to collaborate all this data and actually do it correctly with all the data sources involved.
Good call out with Stackline, by the way, in terms of third party. I mean, because it's a coupon scanning for those who don't know, and
Yeah.
they have this incredible data set. Yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah, and why not use it? From, I guess, your experience, I've had a lot of brands come to me and say, okay, well, if I do this incrementality test and it actually shows me that there's no lift, what do I do? Do I just turn it off? Do I try it again later? Was it, the timing? There's so many things that go into an incrementality test that you really have to consider, especially you probably don't want to do it in Q4 when there's a whole bunch of, sales periods and things happening. So finding the right time is also very difficult. How would you when you're talking to your brands or advertisers out there, do you suggest, do it multiple times a year? Do you think it's an always on thing? How do you think about it?
I think you're always testing, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
think that marketing's about testing, right? I mean, you're testing different tactics, you're testing them, different creatives. So I mean, even then, like, okay, you might find that with this type of offer it didn't work, but you might find later in the year with it does for. So I think you're always testing, you're trying new things, and I think the trap is, oh, we'll prove or disprove this, we'll set it and forget it.
Yeah.
That's so rare that you can set and forget anything and get and continually get good results. Eventually, there's a
The change is happening all the time. It's
yeah.
impossible to set in for.
So I think people forget about that. They're like, oh well, incrementality test. We're going to prove or disprove this. No, you're not. What are you going to find out is what's working now, what isn't. Maybe to your point, maybe you try different angles, different times of year, different creatives. I don't know. I mean, there's so many different types of, of creative formats you can use. There's so many different types of inventory you can buy, right? Even digitally now that you couldn't, right? You can do digital out of home, you can do CTV.
Yeah.
So trying different things out, I think is important.
Yeah. And another question I get a lot from brands is, how big do I have to be to start running incrementality tests?
That's a good one, yeah.
And I read a really interesting, I can't remember where, but I read something very interesting that if you're a small brand and you can just turn something off really quickly and see a difference, you know you're too small for an incrementality test. When you're a brand, when you're running so many different platforms, it's convoluted. You don't know if you turn something small off, you have no idea if it would create a difference.
Yep.
That's when you say, okay, I actually need to run a statistical model to understand if turning something, holding out is actually going to have an effect on my business. And I agree with that. And I think, when you're nimble and you're small, you know what's driving your business. You should have a feel of that. But once you get to a certain size and there's so many things going on, that's when you start to say, okay, maybe I need to find a partner to really help me doing an actual incrementality test.
And if you're small, maybe it is as simple as turning things off and on for a while, seeing what
Yeah.
happens, and does this make sense or not? I mean, I don't think it. I think there's the pitfall of overthinking it too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, and I think that brings us to the next topic, right? Which is AI
Ooh.
and then MMM, right? I mean, I think that we're kind of seeing this blend, right,
Yeah.
across
Yeah.
all them.
This is actually something I wanted to chat about in the hot topics, but wanted to kind of save it for now is these purely measurement companies. For instance, House.io, they're a fully incrementality test. Now they're going into MMMs as well, which is fantastic. I've been following them for a long time. Olivia Corey, I love her content, follow it a lot, and I think their business is incredible. But I'm a little bit scared for their outlook because of AI and how they've siloed themselves into a measurement company. And that's another thing that you have to buy on top of all of your, you have your tools and everything. And these tool providers could spin up these types of businesses. And especially with AI now, I think this is going to be something easier to do within tools and offer as something, as part of their offering. So I'm a little worried for these measurement companies, for instance, the double verify buying Rocker Box. That might be a trend of, it wasn't purchased for a huge amount of money. And that might be because just having a measurement company isn't going to do it for the future.
It wasn't purchased for a lot of money, but I think it was 85 million or something like that. But they had no debt. They grew organically, so they kept all that. So good on them. Now I mean, that's the way you want to do it, in my
Yeah,
opinion, right? Instead of giving all to VC.
that's true.
I don't know too much about House. I'm actually at Marketecture Live on, I think it's the 17th,
Mm-hmm.
New
Yeah.
York. They're one of the AI companies that's been given the ability to
Yep. Yep.
talk about it. So
That.
I'm excited to learn more about them.
Yep.
Then, and we talked about this last time. Is AI, if AI is really eating software, is measurement going to be one of the things it eats, right? I mean, potentially, but I actually, there's the Dwarkesh Patel podcast a couple weeks ago. We interviewed Tyler Cowan again, and he's talking about how, in his opinion, like the AI, yeah, things. I mean, it's moving quickly for us, but generally speaking, is not going to move as quickly as we think.
Hmm.
And adoption on a societal scale will probably be a little
Mm.
lower. I think that's interesting, right? So, and a big factor is people, right? It's
Mhm.
just inertia, people, habits, right? I mean, so I think that in theory, I mean, I think some, can AI, like we talked about last podcast, can you, like, you know, we built we built AI tools where I can actually spin up. You want to run this analysis, natural language, you talk to it, boom, it's done, creates a chart. It's pretty cool, right? But is it going to replace really solid measurement tools? I mean, maybe eventually, but I don't think so yet. But what I think is interesting though is I think on the planning side, Gloria, I'm seeing like such a big impact. Like we're seeing like MMM, like a lot of the MMM companies, traditionally like Analytics Partners, Econometrics, I know BCG's got into it a lot in the last few years. It's these typically black box, very complex. And we would do these MMM projects with these global CPGs. It would take 6 straight months just to get the data, right? Because you're getting all the engagement data from the different agencies globally, getting all their internal data from the different systems, CRM, ERP, whatever, right? And then you're pulling in like data feeds from like TransUnion and political stuff. It would take so long. And then they'd have these regression models, right, that are all usually black boxes. So
Mhm.
what I think's pretty interesting now is we're seeing MMM become more democratized, right? And then the criticism with MMM was always is, and I guess the point I'm coming to is the impact of AI on it, right? So the criticism of MMM was always like, it's slow, it's done once per year. And I mean, I think now it's just typically done quarterly. It's not done once per year anymore, but it's done very infrequently and it's not actionable. Like the brand gets the MMM and says to the agency, like, do this, right? And it's like, okay, what does that mean? An agency interprets it, right? And maybe different agencies interpret it different ways, right? So I think what's interesting is, can AI change this? Can it be more real time, or maybe real time, right? Can it be actionable, and maybe it can be automated, right? So I think this is really cool. It's going to completely change MMM. It's going to change, and I think it's going to be embedded in tools, probably DSPs at some point.
Mm. Oh, I definitely agree. I mean, Google just came out publicly with their MMM, and they just said, "Here it is. Take you can use it." And I think that's a very key, indicator that this is gonna be the trend. MMMs are and these things are just gonna be open sourced, and I think, yeah, as you mentioned, AI can just do this for you and continuously and hopefully, yeah, help you with your planning, etcetera. And, talking about that third piece in the triangle as well as attribution. And something I think I get frustrated with attribution is people think attribution almost is incrementality. They think, "Oh, if I can attribute it, that means it's incremental to my business." Not really. You can attribute it great, but you don't know if that person would have purchased anyways. And if you're using attribution for incrementality, then you're gonna just keep on investing in everything all the time and more and more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, attribution. I mean, I think the sooner last click attribution dies, the better,
Yes, I
right?
agree.
Because is there a place for it? Sure, right? But I mean, like, if you can definitively attribute a conversion to something, fine. But like, the reality is that the customer journey is not that simplistic, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things that happen over time. You do a lot of journey mapping and customer experience work, and we represent it linearly, but it's not. It's like this donut or figure eight or whatever, right?
Mhm.
It's just always people are engaging with your brand at different points and time, different channels. So I think understanding that and attributing it to one, like what happens last, is kind of ridiculous.
For sure.
And also, my man Eric Tilbury, he had called out. It's funny. He posted this GIF where it had like I think a SpongeBob, and he's saying attribution, right? Because it was like this rainbow. It's so funny because I think the desire to attribute everything is kind of ridiculous. And
Yeah.
and I guess my point to him was, I agree it's ridiculous, but I think what happens is, if you try to attribute everything, and you end up doing that, like, who's going to get the credit? It's going to be Meta, Google, the big, the big platforms who have the ability who are reporting on that, right?
Mhm.
So I think it unfairly benefits them, for example, and
Yeah.
probably penalizes a lot of other players that are in actions that are happening, throughout the journey.
Mhm.
So I think it's nice to try to attribute things, but I don't think it's kind of foolish to try to say we're going to every conversion or every lead.
And we can't. I mean, TikTok doesn't play nicely with Amazon, nor does it play nicely with Google. So how are we gonna know if a person went here or there, and how can you attribute everything? It's just not gonna be possible. So, yeah, and I get a little frustrated also with, okay, AMC, now we have AMC, we can you see we can track a user or, privacy friendly track multiple users' journey, and now we can attribute everything, and that's gonna be my incrementality. Well, no, sorry to say that that's not how it works.
Wrong answer.
Yeah, exactly, and I will cringe if anyone says that. Yes, you can more easily attribute things, and you can create more custom attribution models, which I think is very helpful to understand what's really helping this first touch is, other attribution models, which is great. But in no way is it gonna be your incrementality testing, and I think, uh, if my biggest takeaway for this is you really need to ensure you're doing incrementality testing right if you're gonna do it. I think it's an essential piece that every business should be doing 100%. And if a company, if your tool provider or how you're doing it is not, showing their statistical models or what holdout proofs you're using, is it unbiased? You have to ask these questions. You must ask these questions as a brand to ensure that you're doing it right. It's probably a lot of money, and that you're getting the right results. So yeah, I think that would be my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I had in fact, I talked to a friend, a client of mine today, who works at an OEM, right, for auto OEM, and he was telling me how 90% of the traffic coming in on their, the dealership websites, up to 90%, and that is unauthenticated. They have no idea who it is,
Oh,
right? So how do you attribute? I mean, they're doing, they're buying media tier one, done nationally, tier two that's done regionally, and then they've got tier three that's done by dealerships. I mean, how do you attribute, right? I mean, it's being done in fact, it's different agencies, right, typically. So You can't attribute everything. You should try. I think it's important. And I think like if you're doing it right, you have an attribution model, you're tweaking it, you're using it to try to understand. You're not definitively saying we know where every
Yeah.
conversion came from, because that's never going to happen. You have an MMM in place. I think very important, right? You have that, and it's adapting. You're not doing it once per year and revisiting it like the old days. I mean, like,
Yeah.
no, you're constantly running new models and seeing what's working, and based on new evidence, you're making changes to that.
Yeah.
And then I think that you have, you're testing with incrementality, these tests all the time. So I think in a perfect world, you're doing all three. And I think a really like a well-functioning marketing department, they're working with their agency, or if they have do it in-house, they're constantly doing this, and they have the right measurement tools. I don't think
Yeah.
measurement tools are going away. I think it'll be a long time before they're kind of made obsolete, is my opinion.
Yeah. I think, in my personal opinion, it might be another hot take, but I think the conversation we had about CDPs previously might be a conversation we're having about measurement companies in, let's say, a couple years, unless they, I think, pivot themselves a little bit. Of course, incorporate AI, and House.io is doing that. So I'm really excited to see where they go with that. But I think that they need to become something more than just measurement, because as you're mentioning, AI is going to be able to MMM, and tool providers are going to be able to provide incrementality within their product, which is a lot easier to do everything in one product, of course, than going to multiple different vendors. So I think the landscape will be very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Agreed. We're getting so many questions now about all those, right?
Yeah.
And I do want to make a call out. So for MMM, I was mentioning how it could be very difficult. So I met with if you ever work with Tracer at all, I really like them. They have this solution where they can easily like do the ingress for all the data from the different sources, do it really quickly. So I was really impressed with how quickly they could stand it up for a couple of clients. I thought that was kind of cool.
Mm.
In fact, I saw Sarah Martinez at Ramp Up. We spent some time together, and they're a cool company, and Jeff's the CEO, and I think they've done a good job. So I've been very impressed. There's a lot of great tools coming out, right?
Yeah.
In all these areas. I think Chalice is doing some interesting stuff in terms of like the automation and the optimization of campaigns themselves using AI. So yeah, so it's an interesting time. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we're seeing a lot of experimentation, and I think next year it'll look very different because of the speed of. I've never seen things change as quickly, which is
No,
which
every
is
week I
which
need
is
to
great. Yeah.
relearn what's going on and what new model has been released on the AI front. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that we're gonna do this every 2 weeks now, right?
Yeah, we've gotten such good feedback, and so I think from all of our from the great feedback, we're gonna start doing this more periodically, and have some guests on, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, and we finally found a beautiful name for our pod, First Party Pod. So yeah, thank you so much for this episode. I thought it was fantastic, and I'm
Fun.
so excited to do the next one.
Yeah, me too. So it's guests starting next time, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
we'll have guests on. We'll have guests in person. We'll have guests that'll be dialing in,
Yeah.
and then yeah, it's gonna be every 2 weeks. And I mentioned this before, but when I was at Ramp Up, the first person someone actually stopped me and said, "Watched your podcast." Someone I didn't know. So
I
word's
love
gonna out.
that. I love that. Yeah, definitely share if you like the content, and we're excited to do this more and more. Thank you
100%.
so much, and thank you again, Delve Deeper, for your studio.
Hell deeper as rock. Till next time.